Hello everybody and welcome to the live stream. Always a little bit of a tentative step at this point. Just want to make sure I'm actually live and that it's all going as it should. Tells me that I am here. Not exactly clear that it's doing it elsewhere, but anyway. Here we are. Just trying to make sure on my... This is the belt and braces, isn't it? Always got to make sure that it's... Yeah, we're live on the mobile phone now as well, so I can switch that off. So I'll start again. Welcome to our live stream, wherever you are around the world. Hope this time zone isn't too bad for you. 11:30 CET, Central European time. Works for me anyway, being a bit selfish there, but anyway. Yeah, welcome, and lots to talk about. Obviously, post-Spanish Grand Prix, the amazing new stress test that the FIA introduced for that race, and what a turnaround of results they produced. Yeah, right. If you haven't seen the video I did with Peter Wright, the world's preeminent aerodynamicist, I think I can say that knowing that Adrian Newey is out there. Nonetheless, Peter Wright, right up there with Adrian, and his take on why that stress test did not produce the desired results. Well, desired results for some people. Obviously for McLaren fans, it was a huge result, wasn't it? For everybody else, a little bit of a, what was that all about? So if you haven't seen that video, I counsel you to do it. Peter gave me a bit of his time in retirement. Wonderful to chat to him as ever. And actually, I just reading. I was actually just before I contacted Peter, I was rereading this article I did with Ralph Bellamy in a December 76 edition of Autocar. They were the days when you could actually get the designer of the car to write the article, well, ghost write the article with you, which I did that with Ralph. And it's quite funny because in the middle of it, he says, and don't forget, this is actually what became the Lotus 78, the car that effectively was the first ground effect car of all time. Excuse me. And he says, yes, we're very fortunate in the design of the car to contact one of our managers in Group Lotus, a guy called Peter Wright, who's got quite a lot of aerodynamics background. So we've been talking to him about the side sections of the car. Little did they know. Anyway, great. Ralph's still around in Australia doing a great job. Good bloke. Spends a lot of time in that article talking about the gearbox on the 78 as if that was a big break. Well, I guess it was a breakthrough, wasn't it? Because on the 77, would you believe, in case you didn't know it, I'm completely going off at a tangent here, but the 77, the 1976 car, was the car that had the electric switch on top of the gear shift, effectively electric clutch, which gave a massive amount of trouble with the hydraulics and everything else. It never really worked. But it just shows how, again, far-thinking Colin Chapman was. These days, we take it for granted now, all these clutchless gear changes we have, the seamless shifts. And there was Colin Chapman in 76, pushing the boundaries of what was conceivable technically back then, with a switch on top of the gear lever. And Ronnie just had to sort of press it, I think, and that was it. And it worked, kind of. Well, when it was working. So as I say, lots to talk about. And we'll get on to questions very soon, obviously. And I know there are lots of you, and I know inevitably I won't be able to get through them all. So my apologies in advance to those I won't be able to respond to. But quite a lot going on. Last week, Carlos Sainz he's the sort of face of the new Madrid Spanish Grand Prix venue, which is on the calendar for 26. We'll get onto the calendar in a little bit. 2 Spanish Grand Prix next year. Barcelona represented by Fernando Alonso and Madrid represented by Carlos Sainz. Yeah, no love lost there. Anyway, Carlos did a demo in a Williams on the streets of where we're going to see that race last week. So here's a little bit of a video of that. You can see him here. It's quite cool here because he locks up an inside front. So he's obviously getting reasonably quickly, or the tires are really cold, but he lines it up for a donut or two. Hand out in true Nigel Mansell tradition, waving to the crowd. Good stuff. And I like this bit here. Yeah, it's not far from the wall there, is he? I think Carlos Sr. will be very impressed with that. And don't forget, Carlos Jr. was raised in a family where he did nothing but wheelies and burnouts from the age of about 3 in his tricycle. And here's another one, overhead view of Carlos. This one's not quite as dramatic, but nonetheless, you can see what he's about to do. Yeah, nice spin turn there. Good. So nice to see Madrid doing that with Carlos and Williams. Excellent. What else? Sardinia. Well, I mean, it's been an incredible weekend, hasn't it? Because I was in Sardinia, as I think you probably know, for the rally there. Absolutely superb. Once I got the dust out of my lungs, incredible incredible scenery, incredible stages. We drove quite a lot of the stages before the cars went on them the day before. 2 days before actually, and the dust and the rubble and the stones and the elevations and the jumps, just unbelievable, often with absolutely no margin, by which I mean no fence and then just a sheer drop on the outside. And these guys are driving their Rally 1 cars around at who knows what speed through their four-wheel drive. Just astonishing how good they are. Here's a short vid just to capture what it was all about. Beautiful scenery, obviously, in Sardinia. Here's Sami Pahari, about to have a bit of a shunt in the Quasi Works Toyota, and he did all right, yeah, but he does have these offs, and he's not massively quick. Here he is about to have his off. Wasn't that serious, but it definitely wasn't a good thing to be doing, put him out of major contention. Elfyn Evans was breaking the road for everybody right at the front, leading the championships he does, so he did really well to finish 4th overall, I thought. Drove beautifully, and there you see a typical Sardinia bit of road. We'd be, the sort of place where we'd be watching, where I was with Jack. Tanak did a very good job, finished 2nd for Hyundai. The Hyundais were quick. Terry Newell was leading, and on the first day just made a mistake on a flat-out right-hander, flat end 5th, ran a little bit wide and broke the left rear suspensions. That put him out. But Tanak did really well, balanced speed with reliability and consistency to finish 2nd. But it was Sebastian Ogier who was just the class act. Quick, no mistakes. Am I to say no mistakes? Oh, what's this? Yeah, but he just carries on, barges through the barrier there, and goes on to win the Rally of Sardinia. Cali Rovanpera was 3rd, and as I say, Elfyn Evans 4th. So it was a very good rally. Really enjoyed it. And there were some things there that were quite moving for me, because I wasn't say I was close, but I was pretty friendly with Elio De Angelis, one of the nicest, coolest guys I ever knew, let alone Formula One drivers. And there you can see that's the epitome of cool, is it not? I know it's a cigarette, but anyway, he's doing it the right way. Looks just like how it should be done with the cigarette. And look at the polo shirt under the race suit in his Lotus days, isn't that? It's just, I mean, the only word, I know it's overused, is cool. Anyway, I was always an Elio fan, and I was absolutely distraught, obviously, when he lost his life in that ridiculous testing accident at Ricard Fire. And then, of course, it didn't end for the De Angelis family, because in 1988, his father, this is 3 years after Elio's passing, his father was kidnapped in Sardinia. That's why I'm thinking of the De Angelis family. He was there with some mates in the villa they have, and the family was still in Rome, and he was kidnapped, and he was held hostage, ransom, whatever you want to call it, for I think it was about 140 days, something like that, 145 days. It was a terrible time for everybody who knew the De Angelis family, and obviously many people in Formula One, and we all had to keep it fairly quiet because nobody really wanted to talk about it, and we all knew it was going on and the agony that family was going through, particularly after Elio's loss. And there was not much said about it at the time, because the family was so concerned about upsetting the kidnappers, who'd said don't contact the police, as they would. And eventually it was all settled, but it made me think of it, and where it actually happened, where he was kidnapped, was a place called Romanzino, which is a beautiful part of Sardinia. So we visited there, and I basically just paid my respects to Elio and Giulio, Giulio passed away last year, and it was just the most gorgeous part of Sardinia. And there was Giulio after his release. He was released. They did pay the ransom. I think it was in the region of $2 million, something like that. It was a big thing. But those, it wasn't unusual. That was the sad thing. It wasn't unusual at the time for that sort of thing to happen. But anyway, I can't go to Sardinia. I've only been twice, but I can't go there now without thinking about the De Angelis family and how cool Elio was, and what a great driver he was too. I use the word great because he was very, very classy, even in the shadow when he first came over in the Formula 2 car. And he was, I mean, that win he had against Rosberg in '82 was just superb, wheel to wheel. I think it was still the closest finish ever in the history of Formula 1 in Austria. Just superb. So that was that. Going back to, and also on Sardinia Island, I just saw that. It's a Renault Clio in the Williams spec. I haven't seen one of those for ages. I don't know what's happened to them all. I have to go to Sardinia to see one. I haven't seen one in the UK for a long time. I know this is a great thing. This was when Formula One teams badged and did a few upgrades to cool cars with which they were sort of connected with. Obviously, Williams had Renault engines at the time, but look at that. It was a really nice car. The gold wheels, the Williams thing, just great. And even going back to the 60s, you'd have the Jack Brabham version of the Vauxhall Viva, and obviously the Lotus Cortina, and other cars like that. And it's just a shame we don't have that much more. We have McLaren building those undrivable supercar things that, you know, I say undrivable, you know, try parking one, 3-point turning one in a car park outside you know, Sainsbury's on a Saturday morning. It's not exactly practical, is it? I'm talking about real road cars that you can drive. Very few road cars. I suppose you could say the Alpine, but that's, you know, electric. And that's a shame. I just made me think, it's just a shame that the teams don't do more endorsement of road cars and do versions of road cars. It's just the way the market's gone, really, I suppose. Yeah, a quick word about my friend Eric Bhat on the left there, sticking out his tongue in typical Eric Bhat tradition. At Mario Luini, great photographer friend of mine as well, who passed away just a couple of days ago after a long illness. Eric, one of my best friends, very, very good French Formula One journalist, particularly of the late 70s, early 80s, when the whole French Formula One thing was just blossoming, you know, with Renault, Ligier, and all those drivers, 6 or 7 really great Grand Prix drivers. And Eric was right there, very close friends with Alain Prost and Jacques Lafitte, and just an all-round good bloke, such a funny guy. And next to him on his right, Bernard Assay, who equally, you know, great guy, still around, great photographer. And those two were basically the backbone of a magazine called Grand Prix International, which came out obviously before the internet, but it was a massively successful thing for a short period, capitalizing, I guess, really on the whole French thing. But it was just a great magazine. Loved it. Published in French and English. And we lost Eric last week. Very sad, but what a guy. What a lovely, lovely guy. And he was around at one of the best times ever in Formula One, I think. So, yeah, as I say, the 2026 calendar is now out. Look at that. What do we not have there? Looks like no more Imola, doesn't it? And we got 2 Spanish Grand Prix at a time when we have no French Grand Prix, no German Grand Prix. We have 2 Spanish Grand Prix. Quite sure what that means, really. Doesn't reflect the GMP of those various European countries, does it? So, yeah, nice to see there is that they're starting to get the geography together now, and from Miami they go to Canada before going to Monaco, and we don't have to, this year obviously we're going to Canada after coming back to Europe, then back to Canada, then back to Europe, which, you know, that's just, it's been like that since the Bernie days, but now finally they've got it more logical in terms of geography and the carbon footprint left by Formula One around the world. But otherwise, basically, as we thought, good to see Monza, Zandvoort, Spa still on the calendar. You know, a lot of talk about those being fragile races, but let's hope they continue. Begins with Melbourne, ends with Abu Dhabi. Lots of races, lots of triple headers, but nonetheless, the big thing there is that new Spanish Grand Prix in Madrid. As I say, it's Sainz versus Alonso. I think more than anything else, though, this is very good news for Fernando Alonso, because he's getting on a little bit, shall we say. And there is a school of thought that would say maybe this could be his last year in Formula One, he should be looking at retirement, things like that. That's normally what you'd say. But I think, you know, Fernando, from his perspective, has got 2 great things now. One, obviously, he wants to drive an Adrian Newey car in 26, the Aston Martin. So that's his number 1 goal. And then beyond that, you've got this fight between Madrid and Barcelona now. And Barcelona have aligned themselves with Fernando. And I think that Fernando now is in a position probably to get some money out of Catalonia government if it's looking fragile, and that might cement his drive at Aston Martin. It might, if he loses the Aston drive, let's say they go with Max or whatever, and they're going to keep Lance Stroll, then it does give Fernando a reasonable buffer now to try to get a drive somewhere else, because I cannot imagine that Barcelona now would want us to have a Formula One without Fernando Alonso for the next 2 or 3 years, or indeed the Madrid Grand Prix people either, although obviously they are aligned with Sainz. It's in both their interests for Fernando Alonso still to be in Formula One for the next couple of years. That's basically what I'm saying. So this sort of fight between Madrid and Barcelona, I think, has worked to the advantage of Fernando Alonso. So that's good, isn't it? Anything else I wanted to say there? I don't think so. I think it's more or less what I wanted to say in terms of, just a great weekend, wasn't it? what a sporting weekend. Rally of Sardinia, that was obviously the big thing. But then the French Open, our mate just down the road winning that one in the 5th set tiebreak. What a result that was. And we got back in time to watch that 5th set anyway. And it was just amazing. The whole of Murcia here just exploded, which was, as you'd expect, wonderful. And then Canadian Open Golf to cap it all. Kiwi Ryan Fox wins his 2nd PGA event of the year, and he wins the Canadian Open against a very good field as well. So good on Ryan Foxy. That's really good. So there we are. I think let's go to the first question now. This is from Alessandra Durango. Hi Peter. I expect Lewis to perform well in Canada. There are no high-speed corners, and he's never been beaten by a teammate in qualifying there. How do you feel about that? Yeah, I think you're right. I think he will go well in Canada. I don't think he would like to concede that any circuit suits him more than others these days, and no race driver does. I'm good everywhere. But I think being truly practical about it, I think some of the areas of, say, Barcelona or even Imola, and perhaps even Monaco, that have separated Leclerc from Hamilton don't really exist in Canada. So I think he'll be good in turns 2 and 3. That change of direction through the left. It's probably 1 and 2 actually. I can't remember the turn numbers. But into I think he'll be good there because he always has been good there. So why wouldn't he be good there? He'll just do it naturally. Then he's got the chicanes, chicanes are chicanes are chicanes. The long, quick corner after the first chicane, I think he'll be, if it's wet, semi-wet, Charles will be better there. But I think Lewis, if it's dry, obviously he'll be fine there. High-speed braking into the hairpin, he'll be good. Well, if he's not good there, then we know he's really got a problem because that's where he's always been really good, high-speed braking into that hairpin. And so he'll be good there. And then you got the long back straight, the high-speed braking into the final chicane, and again, it's difficult to be slow there. Maybe he'll come out of, maybe he'll brake later than Charles, maybe, but that's all right. That's where he'll feel good. I suppose that's the only place he could be having a problem. If he's on a good lap, he might brake a fraction too late there. And the thing for Lewis there would be brake a little bit earlier, come out of the brakes a bit sooner if necessary, and just make sure he's got a really good exit from there. But I think he'll go quite well. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think there'll be a lot of difference between him and Charles around there. It's very difficult to imagine where Charles is going to pick up a lot of pace over Lewis, unless Lewis makes a serious mistake, obviously on a lap, or vice versa. So yeah, I think you're right. And I think Ferrari could be pretty good there because, again, Canada sort of nullifies some of the things we've seen over the last 2 or 3 circuits, races. And Ferrari won't be, I don't imagine it'll be slow in a straight line. I think it'll be pretty good on high-speed braking, and the rest of it will be up to the drivers, and they're very good around there. So, as I say, yeah, I think Ferrari will be there. But then again, I can't imagine Mercedes being slow, or Red Bull, or, of course, McLaren. So yeah, it could be very, very close. The tyres are the Pirelli softs, as we've seen at Imola and Monaco now. The C6 is the softest of the soft tyres ever used, I think, probably fair to say, by Pirelli. And so it's a very smooth track surface in Canada. There'll probably be quite a lot of deg on day one when the track's green. Nobody ever runs on that circuit, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. But it does pick up rubber pretty well. And so I think Saturday, Sunday, the deg will go away, and it'll be, to some extent, it'll be strategy, but I think the strategy will be pretty much the same for most, unless you qualify near the back and you want to do something dramatic. So it should be, yeah, those who love lots of passing and close racing on the straights, always makes me a bit nervous, all that stuff, I think will enjoy this one. So here we go, yeah, next one. Benzi's News Showdown. Greetings, Peter and stream. Thank you very much, Benzi. Okay, next question from Benzi. Hi, Peter. If you were given €3,000, wow, yeah, that'd be good, that you had to bet on a winner of the World Drivers' Championship, who would it be and why? Well, obviously, if it's a bet, you're taking into account the odds, aren't you? So I'm assuming the odds on Piastri or Lando are incredibly poor now. And if either of them won and you put your 3,000 down, you'd get €1 back, or 3,001 euros back. So I'd have to go for Max, because A, he's in the best points position apart from the McLarens, and B, I think, you know, he could still pull a few wins out, and we just don't know how it's going to go, I guess, in terms of Red Bull's performance. This is a good example. I think Canada, they'll be pretty close to McLaren. And so Max has a reasonable chance of winning Canada, particularly if the weather gets dodgy. So there's a good reason. Hungary, I think McLaren will disappear. But, you know, Silverstone, maybe Max could be up there as well. So I don't know. I'd still put it on Max. So that's why I think I would do it. Outlaw, Benzi wants to see if Peter is still behind Lando, maybe. Well, you know, I wouldn't put it on Lando or Oscar, because you said a bet. And so I know the odds would be ridiculously low there. But if you're asking me between the two of them, I'd say Piastri now. I would say. Outlaw's saying it would be between the McLaren boys, and I hope Piastri. Well, yeah, he agrees. I think, you know, Piastri just basically now just needs to stay cool, win a few more races, finish second in a bunch of races, and he's won the World Championship, hasn't he? I know he's quite capable of doing that. Very capable. He's got a bloke behind him, Mark Webber, who'll be saying, yeah, that's all you need to do, mate. Yeah. So, you know, how is Piastri not going to win the championship now? That's the thing. Is it only if Lando starts winning race after race after race, which isn't going to happen. So, yeah. Ronnie Harb, I would go with Piastri. He's more focused. Well, yeah, and he's also got a big, you know, he's got a big momentum going, isn't he? That's the thing. Nice one. Hi, Peter. Do you think that wind tunnels are obsolete? Often improvements made there do not correlate on track. Should teams ditch the wind tunnel and start building supercomputers? Well, the budget cap kind of solves that problem, in that there's not a massive amount of time you can spend in the tunnel these days, so it has to be used incredibly efficiently. Excuse me while I have a drink. And the same with the CFD, the computational fluid dynamics, which is basically the digital version of the wind tunnel. They're both restricted, and so I don't think the teams would push, or Formula One or whoever decides where we go with the budget cap. I don't think they would say, well, let's just get rid of wind tunnels altogether and go with CFD, because CFD is not cheap. And there's a limit on, obviously, in the computing power you can have as well. So, yeah, you're right. There's often stories about poor correlation. That's usually, you know, it usually comes after the first excuse is, oh, well, we never really thought we'd go that well on this circuit anyway. It didn't really suit our car. We're looking forward to the next race. Even though before the race, they said, oh, yeah, we're really looking forward to this race. Should go well. So there's always that stuff. And then the second one is, oh, well, you know, they're really getting down to it. Yeah, maybe the wind tunnel's giving us spurious results. Of course, the wind tunnel only gives the answers to questions of which it is asked. And quite often they're being asked the wrong questions. And quite often it's not the tunnel, it's other things. And it could be anything from the model making to asking the wrong questions as well. And so I think wind tunnels are there to stay so long as they're going to be allowed, because the sophistication now of a great wind tunnel is something to behold, in terms of the rolling road and the way you can simulate other proximity of other cars as well, and the turbulence from other cars and all those things. And so I think they will keep that balance between them. Obviously it'll change if the budget cap regs get tighter in that area. Chris McClelland, hi Peter, did you ever get to see those Group B rally cars at the mid-80s live in person? Good to see Hayden Paddon, the Kiwi, still doing well in rallying, double European rally champion. Where are we? Sorry, it's frozen again here. Just go back to square one. Hyundai gifted him his 2016 winning Argentina rally car, which he still drives flat out now and again competitively. It was a shame he didn't continue in the WRC. Yeah, Hayden Paddon, very good Kiwi. Another good Kiwi is currently dominating the Australian Rally Championship, focusing on that championship this year, but winning everything. Incredibly quick driver. I'd love to see him in a really good Rally 1 team car. I think he's good as anybody out there, just sensational. Yeah, I did get to see some of those sensational Group B rally cars. I did actually do a stage with Attilio Bettiger in a Lancia, I think. And sadly, he lost his life, didn't he? And I did a stage with Hannu Mikkola in a Quattro in Wales. and I was sitting next to them is what I mean. And what else did I do? Something else. Well, yeah, I mean, I was alongside him watching. I was at Sardinia. I remember actually we were being helicoptered around by David Richards with Colin. It was me and Colin McRae, and we were just going from stage to stage by helicopter watching it all. It was amazing. So yeah, I love those things. Obviously very quick, but not as well. Didn't offer the same protection for the driver as they do today. The whole business of the survival cell was not a big deal back then, and that was the problem, isn't it? We lost not only Bediger but also Henry Toivonen, who was, to my mind, and to that of my dear friend David Hunt, James's brother, younger brother, one of the most talented all-round racing drivers of all time. Just phenomenal talent. But in talking about rallying, I just want to say one thing. And it only occurred to me the other day. Actually, it was Neil Oatley of McLaren, and he used to be Carlos Reutemann's race engineer at Williams, who reminded me of this, that Carlos Reutemann remains, and get this, I say this in the context of Jim Clark winning the Indy 500 and the Formula One World Championship in the same year, 1965. An amazing achievement, a staggeringly amazing achievement. But get this, 1980, July 1980, Carlos Reutemann finished on the podium of a World Rally Championship event, Argentina, and then also within the same week finished on the podium of the British Grand Prix in a Formula One race. Within 7 days. Can you believe that? I'm not sure he gets enough credit for that. I mean, imagine anybody doing that today. They'd be like Max Verstappen last weekend driving a factory Hyundai and finishing second in Sardinia, and now going to the Canadian Grand Prix and finishing in the top 3 in the Canadian Grand Prix. That's what it would be. And you say, oh, well, it was different then. Well, was it different? I mean, the Côte d'Azur rally, Carlos drove a Fiat 131 Mirafiori, factory Abarth, and you know who the other 2 guys were on the podium when he finished 3rd in that rally? It was won by Walter Roll, and the 2nd place was Hannu Mikkola. and he beat Mikkola on several of the stages. And then he went to and then he drove a Williams at the British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch. Finished 3rd. Nursed the tyres very early on because there's a big drama about blistering, I remember. And he wanted to take it very easy. And by the time they realised that the blisters didn't really matter, it's a bit too late. But nonetheless, he still finished 3rd. 2 podium finishes. 1 in rallying, 1 in Formula One. I think Carlos should get a massive, posthumous award for that from the FIA. Mario Mosco. Hi, Peter. Greetings from Albania. Greetings to you. I have a hypothetical question for you. If you were hired as a consultant for Ferrari, what are the 3 things you'd advise them to do now or in the near future? Well, in true autocratic tradition, I'd say the first one would be to make sure that they didn't fire me after 1 year when they realized that I was making a lot of changes and I could have a 10-year contract. So that'd be the first one. I suppose you'd have to protect yourself. The second one would be, well, it's not drivers, obviously. And I think, I would obviously look to get, Carlos Sainz back at Ferrari as sooner rather than later, alongside Charles Leclerc. I think it was a very good team. I don't think it's too late for those 2 guys to get back together again, or put them together again. I think very, very strong team. And then obviously it's just all about the car after that. And I would do all I could to try to get Adrian Newey again out of his Aston Martin contract, see how much money I actually had in the kitty at Ferrari, Fiat or wherever, Stellantis, whatever it is, to buy Adrian out of that and get him to do that. And if not, I would, you'd have to go for somebody like Pete Prod at McLaren and Rob Marshall. You'd have to take the people that are doing a really good job at the moment and just sort of saying, right, this is it. We're going to have to make this happen. And how do we do it? So you'd focus on very good people. And it's not necessarily that, excuse me, I'll have another. It's not necessarily the teams that are doing a lot of winning. Sometimes it's teams on the way up. As I said before, I think there's some very good people at Sauber now starting to do a good job. Very good people at Racing Bulls as well. So you can put together a nice team, but you probably need to do quite a lot of changes on the technical side just to make it work. So yeah, it would be, I would get I would settle the driving thing down by getting Sainz back, and then I would do the technical stuff sooner rather than later. Raul, was Nigel just as good, if not better, than Senna? Also, could Damon Hill get close to Mansell if they were teammates? Yeah, I think Nigel was up there with Senna. For me, it was. I can't think of many occasions when I thought, wow, yeah, Senna just outdrove Nigel there, when they were in more or less equal cars. Sometimes Nigel had an advantage with the car, sometimes Senna did. But of course, we'd never had correct, truly accurate comparisons between the two. But 91 in the wet at Spa, Nigel passing Senna on the outside of Blanchimont was pretty impressive. Yeah, Senna, Donington, 93, disappearing in the rain, absolutely superb. But then again, Nigel was very, very good in the wet as well, as we saw in Portugal 85, when he started from the pit lane and finished 5th. And so, yeah, where was Senna better than Nigel? His corners were longer. I don't think he was any more accurate than Nigel. I mean, Nigel's judgment and his accuracy was incredible. I suppose Nigel was possibly, I was going to say he's more prone to getting bored if he was stuck behind a car that he couldn't pass. And I think that happened in 89. Was it maybe the German Grand Prix, something like that? He just got bored and damaged a skirt on a curb or something stupid. But then again, Senna made that mistake at Monaco, didn't he, when he was leading and just drove into the guardrail at the apex. So, I mean, he got bored as well, or whatever he was doing at the time. His mind was somewhere else. So, and I think Nigel was a cleaner driver than Senna. I don't think he did what, Senna did to other drivers and cars. I don't think Nigel did. Maybe, I mean, Senna was a better politician than Nigel. There's definitely no doubt about that. And if Senna knew that his goal was to get Honda engines at all costs, he would make sure he got on Honda engines and he could basically take them wherever he liked. But Nigel never thought that way. He always felt, I'm Nigel Mansell and they should come to me, sort of thing. I mean, exaggerating slightly. So I think Senna was more politically adept than Nigel. And of course, he had the benefit from very early on in his career of being highly rated by everybody around him, whether it be karts, Formula Ford, Formula 3, and then into Formula 1. He was always rated as a great driver. Nigel never had that at any stage until, he was winning races in Formula 1. So he had to carry a lot of chip on the shoulder stuff with him, which was based around not being rated by, all the British lot. So, yeah, I think that obviously coloured the way Nigel thought sometimes, probably to his detriment. Certainly at Lotus, he could have got more from the Lotus had he been more highly rated, I think, at the time by everyone around him. So Nigel didn't, that he made a few mistakes that he shouldn't have made at Lotus, I think, probably. But that's about the only thing. And that's not really his fault. It's just that people were blind and they just didn't see how good he was, I guess. So there'd be the differences for me. Tightly says, hey, legend. Well, I don't know if you're referring to me, but if you are, thank you very much. Tisno, Tisno. Good morning, Peter. Hope everything's good. Yep, everything's great here in Spain. Lovely weather. Nice out early in the mornings, late at night, cool breeze. Pretty hot during the day now, but if you want to work up a sweat, it's good news. And there's always the surf beach around the corner, so that's good. Good morning, Peter. Everything's good. Do you think Max can bring the fight back to the McLarens? Yes, I do. I think, well, particularly Canada, I don't think the Red Bull will be slow there. And I think the weather could be, changeable weather, should we put it that way, could be a factor, in which case that'll always favour Max because he's just such a natural driver and he's got such a wide palette of ingredients that he can use in his driving, the way he drives with the short corners, with the sensitivity and the touch, that he's got lots more room to maneuver the variables when they come into play. So that's very good. Dominic Sting. Oh, a good Sting. Hey, Gordon Sumner. Hi, Peter. Gordon Matthews. Hi, Peter. Tried short corners while using go-karts a while back, braking earlier and turning in early and trying to keep the go-kart flat and managed to put in consistent and fast lap times. Well, that's great. That's good to hear. I mean, it's not easy to do in a kart because most movements in a kart are very darty and very flicky. And so actually to be able to create a short corner, which inevitably will lead to understeer if you're braking into the corner, and get away with it in a kart, you're doing a good job. I mean, that's very, very good. And I think that's one of the reasons we have a lot of great karters don't necessarily immediately translate to great racing drivers. Vitantonio Liozzi was a very good example, because in karting it is very darty, and the whole key to being a great short corner driver is to have a very, very harmonious, soft feel for transitions. And that's manipulated by the throttle, the brakes, and the steering. And so, yeah, I'm glad you found that, mate. That's really good, Sting. Good stuff. Mackie, good morning, Peter. Hope you're well. How do you think Alex Dunn is performing this year? Do you think he could ever make Formula One? Well, he's got enough people pushing for him. You know, he's with McLaren. You know, if he's going to be good, if he's going to make Formula One, he should do with the setup he's got. I don't know what the verdict was of that shunt, the first corner of the Formula 2 race at Monaco. I think a lot of people jumped onto Victor Martin's back because he's a fairly aggressive, you know, tough driver. I don't know how Alex felt about that one. I mean, to me, Alex had lost the start. And as I said before, you know, this was a classic example of why the pole winner should be able to choose on which side he wants to start the grid, F2, F3, and F1. And he made a mediocre start, but because the track is so dirty on the inside there, Martins, who made a average start, but on the clean side of the road, was in front. And, you know, and at that point, Alex had no problem, I think, no option but to give the position to Victor. But he didn't, because I think it's such an unusual thing for the pole guy to make a reasonable start and then have to give the position to the guy on your left. You know, why would he just probably never entered his head. In which case, it's slightly bad management of the car or the team, because somebody should have said, you know, be aware that the first corner can be like that at Monaco. So yeah, I think he's quick, isn't he? He's always there on pace. But going back to that start position thing, thinking about it, I was just thinking about that. I mentioned that 1980 British Grand Prix that Carlos Reutemann finished third in, back to the third podium, you know, the podium finish in the rally. That the guy who was super quick that weekend was Didier Pironi in the Ligier. And I remember chatting to Pironi after qualifying, and he was telling me he was flat in fifth through Hawthorns at the end of the straight. And I know for the two Williams, certainly for Carlos, it was either a lift and fifth, or maybe back to fourth for Hawthorns. But Pironi flat in fifth. That showed how much grip the Ligier had when the skirts were working. It was an unbelievable car. Anyway, that's by the by. He was on the pole, and I remember I asked him about this after the race. I remember when he pulled up at the end of the formation lap, he pulled up almost in the middle of the road, because at Brands Hatch there's a lot of camber on the track, just sloping down towards the inside. And what you don't want to be on the pole, if you're on the pole on the inside there and the run down to Paddock Bend, you don't want to be on the camber, because you're always going to get more wheel spin. There's going to be an opposite lock deal going off the line. And I remember thinking, I don't remember thinking, but I mean, obviously Pironi was trying to avoid being anywhere near the pole position thing at a time when we didn't have sensors on the grid, and he was almost in the middle of the road, minimizing the effect of the slope, and forcing, I think it was Alan on the left to sort of start further to the left than he wanted to, and he got away with it. Bang! The race started. I remember talking to him afterwards, or Ducarouche. No, it's Ducarouche. I said, how did you get away with that? That was amazing. Oh yeah, I told Didier, no way to be on the right, you must go in the middle, and it just shows, doesn't it? You know, the pole man, left to his own devices, will find the best place on which to start the race. I'm not saying these days you can do it in the middle. Obviously not. You got to do it in your box with the sensors. But it just shows, you know, back then there was absolutely no question of just accepting what they told you to do. You fought for your own little corner. Okay, here we go. M.A. Khan. Hi, Peter. What do you think of Red Bull insiders saying Hadjar has the closest style to Max amongst the drivers? His speed has surprised them. For me, it's been more impressive than the great Kimi. We should stop calling him the great Kimi because he is pretty good, isn't he? I mean, he's as predicted. You know, I think the whole pressure of fast and medium speed corners and having to match George is kind of getting to his head a bit now, and he's making a few more mistakes because he's never going to beat George around fast and medium speed corners. That is for sure, even if he works at it. This year anyway. He might in the future. Yeah, I mean, Hadjar definitely has that ability to be pretty much keep the car as straight as possible at all times. Nice early turn in. Very good. Incredible feel. And I agree with everything they say, if that's what they're saying. I think he has got the closest style to Max. Well, who else wouldn't? I mean, it wouldn't be Liam Lawson, that's for sure. And it's certainly not Yuki Tsunoda, who's got quite wide corners. I mean, he drives pretty well, but you know, he's a George Russell -2, if it's -2.0, if you see what I mean. He drives like George, but a couple of layers below him. But Hadjar is definitely Max in style, and it's only a matter of time before they put him in the A car, I would have thought. Is he more impressive than the great Kimi? Probably, given that he's in a factory Mercedes and he's had a huge build up to this, perfect build up in a way, isn't he? Just, you know, massive amount of simulator, done some testing behind the scenes in old cars, all the rest of it. Been, you know, nurtured into Formula One in the perfect way. The only yardstick he's got is George, and he's looking pretty good alongside George, no question. But for Hadjar to go in under the pressure that he's had in a team that's a bit of a question mark compared with, say, Mercedes, he's doing a beautiful job. Absolutely superb. So I would go along with you. I'd say he's Rookie of the Year so far. Omar Al-Tayir. Hi, Peter. I've been learning so much about Formula One listening to you. Well, I hope we're going down the right path. That's all I can say. I think we are. Keep up the great work. I come from the World Rally Championship world, from the WRC world, and I find myself enjoying Formula One qualifying a lot more than the races. What am I missing? Not much. You're actually hitting the nail on the head. A lot of the races are defined by qualifying. And so, yeah, you know, the racing is these days a matter of time management, trying to do something with a strategy. They're always running slower than they could because they're all worried about tires. The leader is trying to run at the slowest possible pace to look after his tires, but pulling away slightly from the guy behind him. The guy behind him is always worried about the turbulence and how it's going to affect his tires and doesn't want to be too close. And so it goes on. Yeah, you know, so much of it is about managing the Pirelli tires, and qualifying that kind of goes away. Well, it does go away. It's a different sort of management. It's temperature management. And we see that now, but more and more teams are getting on top of that. So qualifying is, as you say, I think more dramatic. And for me, going to Sardinia it was interesting from another point of view, which was I loved everything about it. I loved the service park area. Maybe it should be called something else. I don't know. I kind of like the word service park because it is what it is. You know, they're servicing the cars. There's a limited amount of time, limited number of mechanics who can do a rebuild or a change or whatever on the car. And see the big clock there, and they're all working against the clock. But the point I'm making is that it's all under the awning. It's all quite temporary. There's always a smell of the sea or grass or oil or brake fluid or something going on, reminding me of what motor racing used to be like before they all went into locked garages. And then they just drive out onto the public road, and then you just see them blasting through these stages. Unbelievable speed. And the fact that they're going individually matters not at all, because it's the build-up to when they arrive, and it's the listening of the noise. It's watching the plume of dust get larger and larger as it goes through a series of S-bends as it's approaching you, and the anticipation, and then it goes past and everybody's whoa, you know, and then you wait a couple of minutes and the next car comes. And to some extent, a qualifying in Formula One is a bit like that. The racing is, you know, it is what it is. It's a technical exercise. I'm not decrying it, and I'm not saying we've got to have a lot more overtaking, because I don't think artificial overtaking with DRS or push to pass or any of that stuff is a healthy thing for the sport. I think it's more to do with understanding how they are running the races within the teams and the cockpit of the cars. We should have more radio transmission availability. We should have more telemetry availability, and we should certainly have more access to what the engineers are talking about and looking at. Then the racing, I think, would become a lot more interesting. But in terms of just adrenaline, hard to beat World Rally Championship. It is just sensational. We went out to a stage early, the third stage of the day on Friday. We got there about 7 for an 11 o'clock start, which was no problem. You know, it was great. We had breakfast there, chatting to everybody. You know, it was a great atmosphere. It got hotter and hotter, and we were on the base of one of those huge windmills that Trump's trying to get rid of, which looked so cool, I thought. And it was quite cool as well. It's a nice shade and everything. And we were just there chatting. I was chatting to the guys doing all the actually doing a lot of the technology to do with the satellite feed for cameras and for TV and how they do that. I mean, you had the most amazing Starlink dish there. Anyway, they're doing all that, and then eventually they start, and you just see this plume of dust, and the crowd just go wild. It's a great thing. I love rallying, and I just here's the next question. It's framed down. What do you think World Rally Championship can learn from Formula One? Well, I think Formula One could learn from the World Rally Championship, to be honest. I think we could certainly make the paddock a lot more accessible to the public. That's what I loved about the whole rally headquarter thing, is that all the public were there, and they were watching close up how these cars are stripped down and rebuilt, and looking at the drivers, talking to the engineers. You know, that's a huge thing, and we don't have that in Formula One at all. We make it, oh no, if you want that, you know, Paddock Club, even then, if you pay your whatever it is, your $5,000 dollars for your Paddock Club thing, it's still only a pit walkabout with a whole bunch of people looking at the front of the garage, and you don't see the real Formula One there. So that's one area straight away. And then, you know, beyond that, as I said, we need to have a lot more access to what's actually going on behind the scenes. That's what it's all about. iRacing Aussie. G'day, mate. Good to hear from you. Dear Peter, loving the stream. 89 Canada, what were your memories? Mansell released out of the pits into DS qualified. Magnificent Senna, brilliant Burley, Derek Warwick. Yeah. Yeah, that was Terry Boutsen, I think, wasn't it? It was yeah. I wasn't there, actually. I have to say, the reason I wasn't there is because I was going to say I was in jail. I wasn't in jail. I was in court fighting for my life, actually, with a Formula One team I'd tried to put together. And it got, you know, it had gone sideways due to the misbehavior of various others. And I was suing them all in court. And so I missed most of that. So I take your word for it, iRacing Aussie, that it was a good race. I'm sure it was. But if I wasn't there, I can't really comment on it other than, you know, what I read about it. So, yeah. Derek Warwick was very underrated, I think. Really good guy, still is. Does a great job as a steward when he's there at races, and always rated him, always got on well with him. You know, he went through that terrible tragedy of losing his younger brother, Paul, at Alton Park, and he was just super strong over that, and he was just a great guy. You know, in the Tolman days, he'd turn up with his dad and his uncle, and the whole Warwick family would be there. And he was just a good bloke, always a good bloke. I had a good laugh with him many occasions. So, yeah, it was a great race for him. Senna, yeah, very good. 89. McLaren. Here you go, though. McLaren, well, I can keep going on this. I still are racing Aussie. McLaren, Ron Dennis McLaren, obviously in that era. I'd completely forgotten, and this is I've got to say, because I was doing a bit of research on that whole Carlos Reutemann thing, I'd completely forgotten. I know Tim Schenken, I think, won the first ever race for Rondell Racing, which was Ron Dennis and Neil Trundle, Formula 2, Brabham's, BT35s, I think 1971. And I think Tim Schenken won. Graham Hill might have won a race that year too, I think. Anyway, 72, they had the Brabham BT38, which is a very different car designed by Jeff Ferris, side radiators and various bits and bobs. And Carlos had a big shunt in it. He was driving for Rondell Racing at Thruxton, broke his ankle. But the race before was Mallory Park, which was memorably won by David Morgan in an old Brabham, because he happened to be on old Firestones that were just perfect for the day. And Dave Morgan, very quick driver, lovely guy, good in Formula 3, arch rival of James Hunt, won that Formula 2 race. But what I'd completely forgotten was that there were 2 heats before the final at Mallory Park. And guess who won Heat 2? Mallory Park, Formula 2, beating Niki Lauda. Carlos Reutemann in Rondell Brabham. Absolutely apropos nothing at all, other than that I'd completely forgotten that he did that. I came across this picture of Carlos wearing a garland with Ron Dennis hanging around his shoulders at Mallory Park. I thought, what's that all about? Of course, he did win Heat 2. Yeah, perfect. I think Ronnie won Heat 1. But all those drivers, Nicky, Ronnie, Carlos, Formula 2 in those days at Mallory Park. Big Al Nowitz, perfect time. Thank you very much. Well, that's going back to people who were just, these are questions after we went live, I think. M.A. Khan, Peter, Mark Hughes has done a series on driving styles. He says Oscar is stronger than Norris when it comes to fast corners. Yeah, absolutely correct there. Nothing new under the sun there. He definitely is more aggressive. Particularly, he's now driving so much with the rear. He's just so much more confident of what that McLaren's going to do. Other insights include Leclerc being early on the brakes compared to Lewis. Yep, absolutely. And that's definitely the case because he's a shorter corner driver. So he would want to have a stable platform. As I've often explained, I did a video, if Max is so good, why does he brake so early? There's a video out there. And Charles is very much of that vein. Kilman the Vampire. Hi, Peter. Is Sardinia named after sardines? I was joking about that with my son. He said, oh, Daddy, don't put me off. Don't put me off. But, of course, in Italian, it's Sardegna, E-G-N-A. I don't think that's the word for sardine, is it? Maybe it is. I don't know. Anyway, we didn't have any sardine there, but we did have some nice food. I've got to say, though, Italy, here is the news. Italy is now more expensive than Spain, and it's considerably more expensive than Spain. Restaurants, food, just in general, more expensive, I found. And here's another breaking news. Wizz Air, in brackets Air Malta, I guess they're based at office registration in Malta. I don't know, maybe they're based in Malta. Anyway, Wizz Air, sort of pinky purple livery, is definitely better than Ryanair and EasyJet. Definitely. If ever you've got the choice, Wizz Air is a good airline. Very new Airbus A321s. Very nice airline. Really pleased with them. Flew with them to Rome. And then on with what used to be Alitalia, but it's now Rally Italia. In a, yeah, that was a, 737-300 to Olbia. Just speaking of that, it's kind of a shame, isn't it, that Alitalia disappeared? Because I love the livery of the Alitalia fleet, and also love the livery of the Lancia Stratos. You know, that was Alitalia, wasn't it? The best one. Stratos is still a great car. Oof. Why don't they make them like that anymore? Killerman the Vampire says, I once ate gourmet sardine from Fremantle. They were very tasty, but I've not found anything like it since then. Fremantle in Western Australia, that is, I would imagine. So, no. My mum used to do sardine sandwiches. I used to quite like them for school. I used to have packed lunches, sardine sandwiches. A lot of my mates said, oh, no, sardines. Windsor's got sardines. No way, mate. Yeah. Peter Anderton, there's only 140 Clio Williams left registered in the UK. Well, that's an interesting stat. Why? It's a great little car. I love those. Anyway, Clio Williams. Just going to put it up again in case we forget how cool that was. Where are we? Trying to do something clever now, and I managed to lose all. Here we go. Renault Clio Williams. I had a Laguna 16 valve when I was there, which was good fun. Dwayne, Peter, what do you think about all the talk that Norris is washed out? No, it's all rubbish. I mean, he is what he is. He's just, you know, he's stepped in the right direction. I think he's reduced a little bit of his social media, and I think he's trying to focus a little bit more. But, I mean, if you want to be truly objective about it, I did say before the Spanish Grand Prix that turn 9 is a dodgy corner because of the crosswind there. And when Lando had that moment in FP3, and lost it and went wide in turn 9, he said at the time on the radio, oh, I felt some bouncing. I suspect that was the crosswind that comes through a little channel there between the grandstands. And I think that spooked him. I think it spooked him in terms of confidence when he needed to go out on the soft tire, you know, and lean on it on really quick corners. So I don't think he was losing a lot through 2, 3. I think he was very good out of 2 and 3 at Barcelona in qualifying. I can't imagine that Oscar was any better through 4, 5, 6. I just a matter of a little bit here, a little bit of confidence there, just leaning on it that Oscar had it from Lando. So I think in Canada he'll be right there. It's easy to say that, but I just find it hard to understand where Oscar. I think Oscar will be super quick in Canada, don't get me wrong, but I can't see where Lando's going to be much slower. Where would he be slower than Oscar around Canada? I can't see where that would be. There aren't any turn 9s in Canada. Adi Matteo, hi Peter. Well, going back to that, is he washed? I don't think he's washed out, no. And I think he'll still have his days when Oscar doesn't get it quite right and Lando will get it right. And watch out for those. It could well be Hungary. Could well be Canada. It could be anything. It's very close. It's very close. Other than that, Oscar has this sort of Jack Brabham-like shell around him of being impervious to pressure and big mistakes. Whereas Lando appears to have a more porous shell and is more open to all these things that keep going on around him. My solution to that was that he gets rid of all his social media, focuses 100% on his side of the garage, disassociates himself as much as possible from the other car, the other side of the garage, just focuses 100% on his gut feel in the car and just drives it and gets back to really enjoying it. I think that's part of the thing. Enjoy driving the race car and enjoy the weekend. And I think Oscar does all the time. I think Oscar feels privileged to be there all the time in his own way. He doesn't maybe say that, but I think it comes out in his body language. And I think Lando needs to capture some of that. And it's, I'm sure he does feel humble in that sense and that he is very happy to be there, but I'm not sure he enjoys every aspect of it. And it's with a heavy heart that I don't know if it's true or not, but I think Lewis was pretty upset after the Spanish Grand Prix. And I think that's a bad thing because, well, of course it's a bad thing. And it's a bad thing for one reason. He needs to enjoy his racing, to be driving at his best. I think any driver needs to enjoy what they're doing. And if they're finding it torture and they're basing all of their involvement on the result of the day, then they're never going to be at their best. You've got to enjoy what you're doing. And a good example was Terry Neuville, actually, I thought, in the Rally of Sardinia. He was leading. 4 stages he'd done. He was leading the rally first day, going really well, driving beautifully, unbelievable. Then he made a small mistake, about the size of the mistake that Ogier made on the Sunday, but got away with, admittedly on a much faster bit of road. And because of that small mistake, he hit a wall, destroyed the left rear, and that was it. Just bang, hit the wall, gone, out of the rally in effect. Did score some points on the Sunday, which was okay. But I was talking to him afterwards, and I was absolutely shocked at how, not shocked, I was blown away by how, not relaxed is the wrong word, but how accepting he was of the situation. And it was still like, yeah, but I love rallying and this is what happens. And I'm not going to analyze it to death. It's just, it happened and I love being here and I'm going to go out and drive flat out tomorrow when they repair the car. And I thought, wow, it's very refreshing to see that. This human being putting that to one side and just carrying on. And you don't get the impression that Lewis is doing that at the moment, or Lando. They're both letting the emotions get on top of them in terms of the results. That's a great shame because he needs to understand more that it is about enjoying the job he's very privileged to do. Quentin Hirschfield, hi Peter, what do you think of Jules Bianchi as a driver and do you have some stories about him? Yeah, I always rated him obviously very highly. He was one of the guys that was always going to be there. Didn't know him that well. I was very respectful of his uncle, great uncle, I guess he was, Lucien, and also he had 2 great uncles, didn't he? Mauro and Lucien. I don't think they were direct relations, but anyway, he came from a great racing pedigree. Lucien particularly, very, very good. There's a good example of a driver who was totally versatile, whether he's doing the Tour de France in a 250 GTO or the London-Sydney Marathon in a Citroën or finishing third in a Grand Prix in a Cooper BRM, you know, very, very good. But and Jules came from that. So I was always intrigued by that. And he spoke quite fondly of them when we did the odd interview or two. I remember being slightly confused by Jules. I think it was Singapore. I know Malaysia. I was chatting to him about driving F2 and doing F2 and then simultaneously testing Formula One. And he was saying how difficult he found it jumping from one car to another, which surprised me only in the context of Lucien Bianchi, really. I mean, how he could jump from one car to another. And what we've been talking about earlier today, you know, the Carlos Reutemann rallying to Formula One in 1 week. I was always a bit surprised that he did find it that difficult to go from one to the other, whereas George Russell never did. I remember George, when George was doing Formula 3, GP3, he was also testing Formula One Force India and running across the paddock, then back to GP3, and he was still quick in GP3. Anyway, that's about all I can say about Jules. I just think, you know, very unlucky. I can imagine, I mean, that accident was just so sad, so ridiculous, should never have happened. And because of it, we have much stricter protocol now to prevent that happening again. Just skating on wet grass into a ridiculous moving machine that shouldn't be there. So there we go. Trail break 3. Henri Pescarolo, he says, I hope nothing bad's happened to Henri. I haven't seen anything, but if they have, I'd be very upset. But equally, when you just say Henri Pescarolo, I think, wow, what a great helmet livery, that bright green, at a time when I don't think anybody else had ever had bright green. It just broke new ground, and it was echoed by the Matra color coding on the car. Just superb, that blue against the green. I absolutely loved all that. I was a massive Pescarolo fan, and what he did at Le Mans deserves everything, you know, that happened to him. Lovely guy too, lovely guy. So Ben Abdeid Sadler, the interview with Peter Wright was fascinating. The front wing TD was a ginormous waste of money. Try harder, FIA. Yeah, well, I think, and Peter was saying, you know, it's the flap, isn't it, that they need to be focusing on, and that's where all the drama's coming from. But he does make the point. He does make the point that in order for these mid-season changes or modifications, clarifications to the technical regulations to be approved, all the teams have to give it 100% backing. And of course, McLaren, if you think about it now, they were never going to back any sort of change that actually affected them. They were also going to say, no, sorry. So they just approved something knowing that it was never going to make any difference. So none of us should be surprised, actually. So the whole thing's nonsense, isn't it, from beginning to end? And it's all just carrying on as before. Hey, good people, Peter Windsor, thank you very much. King Noob, Peter, what a funny name. That's, well, good name, probably. King Noob. Hello, Peter. Do you think fragile Pirelli tyres are the reason why drivers are not using short corners, especially during the race? No, I don't. I think you can... No, I don't think it's anything to do with that. And the tyres are... Let's just make one thing clear. The tyres aren't necessarily fragile. The tyres are built to the specification requested by Formula One, which is to build tyres that fall off a cliff and force everyone to come into the pits and make tyre changes. That's what the recipe is. And Pirelli said, okay, we'll go and build that. That's what they're doing. They're just conforming what they're being told to do. That's the first point. Secondly, yes, of course, in the build up to that, there is degradation. But that doesn't affect, in reality, I would say, as we saw with Oscar Piastri, he was always more likely to overheat the left rear in Barcelona than the left front because of the way he drives. And so it proved. And with Lando, he was always more likely to overheat the left front because of the way he drives. And so it proved. So it's different from one to another. And I think the reason Max was able to be so good on the soft tyre at the first stop on that new soft is because of the way he drives. And because he's quite linear in everything he does. And when he brakes, he's basically got all four wheels square to the road, even if it's in the middle of a change direction section of road. And when he comes out of turn 2 into 3. He's asking less of the right rear, asking less of the left rear. He's massaging a little bit what he does with the left front, but he's done most of the groundwork in the middle of turn 2, which Oscar and Lando are not doing. So, you know, that's where Max's ability to get more out of the tires shows through. In the race, it's often very different. In the race, quite often, you have to follow the car in front in terms of where they're going into the corner, unless you've got a big advantage and you're trying to do something down the inside. But if you're kind of locked where you are, especially if it's semi-wet, you follow what everybody's doing. So you can be much less imaginative when you're in traffic. But when you're on your own in the race, you'll still see Max doing exactly what he does in qualifying. The reason you don't see it very much is that they very rarely show cars when they're on their own. They tend to show only bunches of cars, and bunches of cars are usually following one another. Livio Argensano. He was never beaten in qualifying there. 24 Russell was on pole. Where was Lewis in front of Russell? Okay, well, somebody said that Lewis has never been beaten by a teammate in qualifying in Canada, and Livio is correcting that. Okay, all right. Well, good point. But I still think Lewis will go quite well there. Trail brake, Ferrari mounted a new floor. Okay, I'm sure everybody else has as well. They're going to a completely different circuit now. It's a low downforce circuit. So the cars will look much nicer than they have done, because in theory they'll have the smaller wings and various other bits and bobs, and they'll look pretty good in low downforce form. Let's go back to the top. So, a lot of questions again. So sorry if I'm not going to be able to get through it. Jason Avier, can you identify an area where you think Max and Leclerc could improve as drivers, only from a physical driving point of view? I did say a few years ago that I thought Perez was showing up Max in terms of traction out of slow corners and how to massage the right rear or left rear, depending if it was left or right hander, out of slow corners. And I think Max has improved a lot in that area as a result. And nothing I said, but I think he was aware of that. And I think Max now is very, very good in terms of putting the power down in a very, very linear way. And his throttle application is pretty much, you know, on a piece of string based on how much load he's got on the outside rear. That's one area. Where else? If you were saying to, if you're having dinner with Max, he said, okay, where do you think I can improve my driving? Not sure I could think of anywhere really. I suppose you could say, try to be a bit cooler when you think the FIA or the team are doing the wrong thing. I suppose that's about the only thing really. You don't want any more penalties. But I think in terms of what he does with the race car, hard to think of Sterling Moss or Jim Clark or Fangio or Ascari or Lauda or Schumacher or Hamilton at his peak or Senna, any of these guys doing a better job than Max. I think that's the stand. That's how good he is, and that's why he's getting so much out of that Red Bull compared with Tsunoda. Leclerc, again, technically, I mean, he makes more mistakes than Max. He drives a very, very similar way, but he makes more mistakes when there's not too much pressure. I suppose the one area you'd want him to focus would be on Fridays and Saturday mornings more. Just needs to go into a Friday thinking it is the start of the race weekend. That's distinct from just a Friday untimed practice. I think there've been a few occasions when he's lacked information about the tires or the cars because he's had to sit it out. And he's quite emotional compared with Max. So you'd have to, I think, create more of a bubble for Charles to be immune from all the outside factors that inevitably are there when you drive for Ferrari. It's about but technically, can't see many areas where he'd want to improve, where he could improve to be as up there with Max. I think he pretty much is there, pretty near Max. Okay, so we're just confirming that Russell qualified P1, Hamilton 7. Okay. So Hadi Musto. Is it possible that the front wing changes did not affect the pecking order because the track and the tyre compound suited McLaren? And how likely is it for teams to catch up with the big upgrades? Well, they've all got big upgrades all the time. So it's not a question of upgrading to what McLaren have now got. They've all tried to do that anyway. So what you have is what you've got. And there's still obviously a lack of knowledge and understanding in all the teams except McLaren. Red Bull probably are nearest to that, to getting that right. Although Mercedes have their moments as well, don't they? And did we not see any change in the pecking order because it was Barcelona, because it was a high downforce circuit with a lot of corners? I don't think so. I think that, you know, that would have been, that was a circuit where the whole flexi wing concept should be very effective. And so it was. Canada, they don't need as much downforce at Canada, anything like as much. So it'll be less effective there, I think. So any changes that they've had to make will be even less effective, I think. And you'll see teams like Ferrari being nearer, not because of the regulation change, just because the layout of the circuit is less hurtful to Ferrari than Barcelona. That's the reason. I think the real, you know, the problems with the FIA testing will still be there, if that makes sense. It's quite complicated, the whole thing, isn't it? I mean, none of us really know, least of all the FIA, quite obviously. So, but we'll have to have a look. Okay. Hill Arim. Oh, there was one question I didn't answer back. I'm sorry, I can't even find it now, but it was, how would Mansell and Hill have got on as teammates? Well, you're looking at a very good long corner Oscar Piastri type driver loading up the rear, very precise, very good balance and car control, Damon Hill, alongside a super good short corner driver of enormous sensitivity and touch, Nigel Mansell. So on any given day, given equality, I would say Nigel would always have been quicker than Damon. But Damon, you know, had his own qualities, like as Piastri obviously does, you know. So yeah, I think Nigel would have had him, but Damon would have, in certain situations, good in the wet too, obviously. Here's a super chat. Mercedes won 8 constructors in a row. Can't McLaren have some time in the sun without people complaining of dominance? Yeah, of course they can. And I've always said, you know, I think if you're a McLaren fan, what happened in Barcelona is extremely good news. And it's good news not only for Spain, but also for the rest of the year as well. So, yeah, I don't think anybody's anti-McLaren here at all. I'm a huge McLaren fan, particularly now that they're orange, and there's a lot more respect for the heritage of McLaren as well with Zach Brown there. I think he does a great job there. So yeah, got a lot of time for them. It's just that I'm echoing what seems to be the statistical reception of a McLaren dominated championship, which is that TV numbers fall away and general interest seems to fall away. Why that is, I've got no idea, because for me, the battle between Piastri and Norris is fascinating. It's always great to see two very, very good drivers in the same car battling it out. As I said last winter, you know, the biggest problem for Norris, when everybody was predicting Norris would be world champion, as I predicted last winter, the biggest issue was always going to be Oscar Piastri. It wasn't going to be Max, wasn't going to be Charles Leclerc, wasn't going to be George Russell. It was going to be Oscar Piastri. And hopefully, I think I've been proved correct there. And I think that's a great battle. But it seems as if the general Netflix Formula One fans of the world want more than just a McLaren infight. That's the only reason we talk about the effect of the FIA testing. Sishan Asfar, Peter, why is there such a problem with the second Red Bull car? How do they improve the characteristics, drivability for the other driver? And if Max leaves, who would you pick to replace him? Well, yeah, I don't think it is a problem with the car. I think it's just the driver. We saw Perez have some terrible days as well. He had some very good days, and he won races in that car, which is more than you can say for Tsunoda or Lawson. And Perez must be feeling pretty bitter now, I would have thought, along the lines of, well, you know, if I'd been there, they'd be doing a lot better. And he's probably right. You know, I think he would be doing a better job than Tsunoda. But I think I just, in general, unless the guy is truly gifted, as Max is, I think Red Bull are very poor at handling the development of drivers like Tsunoda or Daniel Ricciardo or Liam Lawson. They don't seem to have any clue of where the failings are of those drivers and how to get them through that and how to get them to improve. They didn't do a very good job of keeping Daniel Ricciardo. They should have massaged all the things that he does really well, and Trackcraft was one example of something he did even better than Max, in my opinion. But his corners a bit longer and his lovely touch, but he could have learnt short corners, but he never did. And they never pushed him into doing that. And it's the same with Lawson. I mean, then they hire Lawson, who's, well, Perez, we know. Perez, very good on the back of the car. And that's why I think he stayed there for so long, because there was a moment when he was really showing up Max in that department. And that was good. And, in my opinion, they should have hired Carlos Sainz now. Carlos Sainz should be in that other Red Bull. And if he was, I think they'd be scoring some good points with that car. More points than they've scored with Tsunoda and Lawson. And so that's another problem with Red Bull. They've got this thing about some drivers they want, some they don't. And, they've got to learn to put some of that behind. I guess it was Max that said, I don't want Carlos Sainz. I guess it goes back to when they were at Toro Rosso together. Something happened. I don't know what. Maybe Carlos was a bit too quick. But at the end of the day, Red Bull should have said, no. If McLaren, so long as McLaren had got Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, we've got to have Carlos Sainz in the other car. Thank you very much. End of story. That's what should have happened. And they didn't do that. So, that really answers the second part. I would get whether Sainz could then take over from Max is another matter. I'd like to think that I could pick up the phone and get Charles Leclerc if I was running Red Bull and Max left. I'm pretty sure Leclerc would jump straight away. I'm pretty sure he would. Depends when it is, of course. If it's midway through 26 and Ferrari have got by far and away the best car and the Red Bull's struggling to be midfield, I don't think he would jump, obviously not. But, so, yeah. I think the mistake they made was not to hire Carlos Sainz, the obvious driver. And now they're relying on sort of second division drivers. Yep, Hadjar now is well above that, and he's the obvious guy to have in the other car. But at the time, they made the mistake of not hiring Sainz. Bono Bronk, Henry Toivonen lost him. Yeah, he did. As I say, Henry Toivonen was an excellent, wonderful driver. Very talented. So, son of Paolo Toivonen, I think it was. Toivonen? Paolo? Yeah. Very good driver as well. So, let's have a look. Aston Martin has a sweet new state-of-the-art wind tunnel facility. Yeah, you can bet that it is. Adrian Newey, state-of-the-art wind tunnel facility. There's a lot of stuff going on last week about Lance Stroll's going to retire. Imagine that. Imagine if Lance Stroll retired and Lawrence Stroll said, right, I had enough. I'm out of here. Forget it. I don't want to do this anymore. My son and I are going to win the World Rally Championship or whatever, or downhill skiing. Imagine that. And Adrian then goes to Ferrari. And Lewis Lewis retires and enjoys his life as a Ferrari ambassador for the rest of his life. Carlos goes back to Ferrari and everybody's happy. That'd be good, wouldn't it? Imagine Ferrari now with Adrian. Anyway, he's at Aston Martin. Well, it's a shame. But anyway, he's there and they've got this great wind tunnel. The CFD will be brilliant. And yeah, there you go. Sarah, sorry if you've already answered this, but opinions on the new Madrid track. My dad wants to go next year, but not sure if it'll be worth it. Yeah, for sure it'll be worth it. If only for the atmosphere, being at the first race, Carlos Sainz, Fernando Alonso, Spanish enthusiasm. No idea about the track. Probably be very difficult for viewing, I would imagine. I think the track would probably be quite interesting, but have grandstands. Will it be worth it? Depends how much the tickets are. I wouldn't pay more than, I don't know, 200 euros to watch a Grand Prix, I think. If they're 500 euros for a decent grandstand, probably better off watching it on TV. But I'm not going to put people off. I think it will be definitely worth going. Go. Don't disregard what I said about the tickets. Adi Musta. Is it possible that the front wing changes? Oh, we've done that one. Sorry. So here we go. Benzi's News Showdown again. Hi, Peter. With your vast Formula One experience, well, I don't know about that. Seeing teams dominate with a better car, can you see Oscar winning 8 more in 25? Australia would outscore Finland in a national Formula One league table at 58 v 57. Wow, that's an interesting one, isn't it? And then if you compute per head of population, that would be an interesting thing to bring New Zealand in as well, wouldn't it? I'd be interested to see whether New Zealand finished there. Yeah, I can see Oscar winning 8 more races. He's that good. I think he would. And as I predicted, you know, he was always going to be the problem for Lando. And I think Lando underestimated what he needed to do to beat Oscar Piastri. And that was a big mistake on Oscar's. As I say, it's no pressure on Oscar at all, because even if he finishes second now, a bunch of second places, that's going to be great points for the championship. If Isaac was offered the second Red Bull seat, do you think he should take it? No. Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't he? Absolutely. Of course he should. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether in reality it's as good a car as a Racing Bulls. The point is he's suddenly made the Red Bull A team and he could potentially be the #1 driver when Max leaves. So there we go. Trail break. Mr. Peter Sauber was at the Spanish Grand Prix. Yeah. And? Good. Yeah, I always remember Frank Williams being very dismissive of Peter Sauber when he cashed in, sold to BMW, when Frank did not sell to BMW and retained the ownership of his team. It's very disparaging. I kind of see where Frank's coming from as well. Kimi Räikkönen, this is Bono Bronk. Kimi Räikkönen and Heikko Kovalainen also had their rallying careers. Actually, Kovalainen is still driving Rally Japan. He is. He's doing very well. And great driver on gravel. I did an interview with Kovalainen over the winter about this very point and the heart surgery that he came through. And he's doing well. Jos Verstappen, as I say, is in Rally 2, finished top 10 in Hungary. A few retirements in front of him, but nonetheless did well. Had a big shunt, I think, in Sweden or somewhere next rally. But that's Jos for you. But don't forget, Sterling Moss, I think, won his class 3 times in the Alpine Rally. And he, in fairness to Sterling, he would then jump into an HWM or a Maserati and go very well the following weekend at various racetracks. So Sterling was the model of versatility and probably the nearest we have to Carlos Reutemann in terms of what he achieved. Vic Elford too would be another I would include in that bracket. Vic sadly was never given a proper F1 opportunity, but what he did with the Cooper BRM at the French Grand Prix 68, P4 in the wet, first Grand Prix drive, no testing, unbelievable achievement, not a very good car, on the back of having just won the Daytona 24 Hours, the Targa Florio, and the Monte Carlo Rally. Vic Elford, let's hear it for Vic. Lou Sequoia, hi Peter, I saw some footage of Nigel coming and leaving the pit lane like a madman. Is this why they applied the speed limit? Also, have you ever seen injuries caused by the danger of it? Well, yeah, I mean, they did bring the speed limit in because it was unbelievably dangerous. And I know that better than most. Okay, I didn't get hurt. But when we had that problem with the pit stop on Nigel's car in Portugal 91, the car left the pit stop. I won't go into the details of why. The car left the pit stop with the right rear not properly fastened. And as he drove out of the pits, the right rear came off. So he was stranded in the pit lane with no right rear. And he was in what they call the intermediate lane, I think it is. There's the working lane, intermediate lane, and then the fast lane. Fast lane. And the intermediate lane was about that wide. So already he had a wheel in the fast lane. And I ran up with the boys and the jack and everything else and getting the car, trying to get the wheel on the car so he could get down the pit lane. And or bring him back, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah. And there were cars going past us at 100 miles an hour. Absolutely no problem, literally 3 inches away in the fast lane. And we were eventually disqualified for working on the car in that fast lane. But to me, that was completely ridiculous for 2 reasons. One, there was no way you could work on the car in the middle working lane because it was not wide enough. It wasn't even the width of a Grand Prix car, first point. Secondly, if the fast lane has no speed limit and it's part of the racetrack, why were there no yellow flags? There was a stationary car there with people working on it. There were no yellow flags either to warn the cars to slow down. So on 2 counts, the FIA got it completely wrong. And anyway, that was it. And it was, to me, that was first-hand knowledge of how dangerous it was in those days when we didn't have a speed limit. I'm not aware of anybody being physically hurt because there was no speed limit. I was trying to think about that. I mean, Carlos sadly hit a Osella mechanic in the pit lane in Zolder in 81. But it was literally 3 miles an hour. He was driving out of the garage like that. And I think the mechanic who was in the next garage was on the pit wall, and he sort of stepped back and Carlos hit him and he fell over and cracked his head. That's something to do with speed limits, just to do with cramped pit lanes. I think that was more of the issue. It's always been more of the issue, is the cramped pit lane. So, Rhoda Borrocks, I remember Peter Warr having some unkind things to say about Nigel's ability early in his career. Yeah, he did. And he never took to Nigel. Like I've got to say, a lot of English people, influential English people, never took to Nigel. Partly because of the Birmingham upbringing and accent, I think. Partly because Nigel was very, very honest and open and was never afraid to say exactly what he thought at any given moment. And Peter, I think, was used to much more diplomacy and civility from drivers, and subservience also probably. And Nigel would never do that with Peter Warr. And so they were always at loggerheads. And Peter made life pretty difficult for Nigel. I've recounted a couple of things. You know, I remember Nigel at the beginning of 82, beginning of 83, after Colin had passed away, Peter Warr ringing him to say, well, you got the drive for the first race or two, but we're trying to look for the proper, our permanent driver. But until we get that guy, you can be in the car for a race or two. It was that sort of thing. And they were trying to get Derek Warwick. And then the famous one at the Brazilian Grand Prix, first race of the season, probably 84, might have been 83 actually. Nigel had asked for a couple of extra passes for some friends in Brazil. And Peter Warr came into the coffee shop at the hotel where we were having breakfast, and walked up to Nigel and said, oh, Nigel, yes, I've got good and bad news for you, interrupting our breakfast. And Nigel said, well, what's that? Better give me the good news first, or something like that. He said, well, the good news is I've got the extra passes. The bad news is you can't have them. And walked away. So that's what it was like. Yeah, not very good. Not the way to get the best from your driver, I think. That sort of thing would never have happened to Ayrton when he drove for Tolman or McLaren. That's the difference, you see. That's the sort of thing Nigel put up with for a long time. Zishan Aspar, how do you rate Bortoleto from what you've seen so far this season? Very good. I think Bortoleto is actually very good. I mean, his corners are about as long as Colapinto's, but he doesn't make as many mistakes, and he doesn't lean on the car quite as much. He doesn't ask as much of the car as Colapinto, and he's got a lovely touch, actually. I just would love to see him. I mean, maybe he's going to be fine. Maybe he's going to be a sort of Ayrton Senna, very, very good, wider corner entry. But he looks very good in all dimensions. Braking, high-speed braking, slow speed, traction, change of direction, chicanes, curbs. He's good. I rate him very highly, actually. I mean, speaking of Colapinto, he does seem to be struggling, doesn't he? I don't know what it is. As Flavio said, okay, you have the car, you have the drive, I love you, but do not damage the car. Maybe this is what happened. I do not damage the car. Do not damage the car. And that's probably more like it. Because they're probably stretched on budget now for rebuilds, aren't they, at Alpine? But he just doesn't seem to be there, does he? It's not the same Colapinto we saw last year. And Bortoleto now looks a lot better. Hadjar's sort of gone into a different stratosphere. And, Gasly's showing him up big time as well. Bring back Jack Doohan, I say. Give Jack more drives, more opportunity. Riley 57, what do you think the odds are Max gets a race ban this year? He has 2 races to go and he'll have 9 more races on 9 points. Who do you think would replace him? I think the odds are pretty high. And I think if Max begins to think, well, 2025, not a lot I can do here, I think you'll probably quite enjoy getting a race ban and sitting at home watching it all on, watching something else on TV. Not sure. Red Bull must be thinking along, well, what are we going to do in that situation? I don't even know who their driver is. Who is it? Is it Lindblad? Yeah, put Lindblad in the car. He's obviously very good too, isn't he? Old Arvid. Yeah, I'd put him in. It'd probably go quite well. Probably be quicker than Yuki, actually. You just get in, just be super good. Be interesting, wouldn't it? Perez and Bottas for Cadillac? I hope not. Talk about dredging up the past. Why would they do that? Why wouldn't you get at least one American in there? It's a Cadillac, for Pete's sake. There are plenty of good young Americans out there. Lots of them. You get one American and then, I don't know, some good young kid. Vesti, somebody like that. I don't know. But Perez and Bottas, come on. Dwayne, Peter. Oh, so this stupid stuff. You're going on about this, Dwayne. You guys need to, you particularly need to get a life, because if I rate Lando Norris, it's because of what he specifically does very well. If I rate Oscar Piastri, it's because of specifically what he does very well. And as for Zach Brown, I think Zach would love to see either driver win the championship. Obviously, he's closer to Lando because he's worked with him since Lando was a baby. So what do you want me to say, mate? Westerly Storm 99. Hi, Peter, from the land of Formula One bad boy, Eddie Irvine. Ireland. It is interesting to watch your prediction of Ferrari's mistake in bringing Lewis to the team. Yeah, well, I'm sad I'm right there, because it was a mistake. They didn't need to fix the drivers. It was so clear. All they needed was a decent car. Simple as that. And they get it so wrong so many times. Oh, we got to get Rubens Barrichello at Williams. And we bring all that BAR and Ferrari experience. He'll turn the team around. Yeah, right. And Felipe Massa with, Rob Smedley. They'll bring all the Ferrari engineering and knowledge to Williams. Yeah, right. It was the same, when Prost was running his own Formula One team. The professor, he's bound to do a brilliant job. He's the next Ron Dennis. Yeah, right. And so it goes on. Yeah, it's about having good engineers and making it work with them. They're all prima donnas, most of those engineers. You have to dance around what they want to do, but they're worth it, because they are what makes Formula One what it is. They make the cars. And if Ferrari, Freddie Vasseur, failed to get Adrian Newey, then, that's the massive black mark and failure of their career. And as I said, I suspect that all the drama of trying to hire Lewis detracted from the focus of trying to get Adrian Newey. They didn't need to get Lewis. They had 2 good drivers. They had as good a driver pairing as you could find on the Formula One grid, for Pete's sake. And they blew it apart. And they also blew the Adrian thing apart. Good job. Anyway, Dwayne, you keep putting that question in. I'm going to have to block you soon if you keep doing that, all right? I know you've asked some good questions in the past, but it's getting to be irritating. Jomo, drop a like on the live stream if you're enjoying. Thank you very much, Jomo. That's very kind. Benzi's Showdown. It's looking like a cam chat. Not sure what that is. So there we go. Oh, now Dwayne's going on about I'm using racist accents. I'm actually imitating an Italian speaking Italian. Is that racist? If that is, then I'm sorry. Zishan asks, Peter, what did you make of Nico Rosberg saying Lando should work with a mental coach psychologist? What do you think Lando has made? Why do you think he's made so many mistakes this year? Probably because people keep telling him he should work with a psychologist. I think that's the worst advice you could probably give him. As I keep saying, just put him in his own bubble, separate him from the other side of the garage, and let him drive with gut feel. Stop worrying about psychologists. Stop worrying about his image. Stop worrying about brands. Stop worrying about everything else. Just drive the race car and enjoy it. Don't even tell him what lap times he's doing. Just enjoy the race car. Sports psychologist. I can't think of anything worse. Mental coach. Got to be joking. No way. Right. What are we going to do here? So we've got some other questions here going all the way up. So here we go. Where are we? Rhoda asking another question. People who complain that Formula One racing is not what it used to be clearly forget that in the 60s it wasn't uncommon to have the first 3 cars home on different laps. Yep, that's very true. Also, they tend to forget that racing then was often 2.5 hours, 100 laps at Monaco, unbelievably physical, difficult sport, much longer races, which is why there's a lot of attrition, but also because the cars were much more fragile and obviously the technology was a lot more basic. So yeah, we're much better now than we used to be, but that doesn't mean to say the racing was bad then. And if you talk to people who are authorities on the 50s, or indeed let's talk about the 52, 53, when the racing was completely dominated by Ferrari and Alberto Ascari. I've never spoken to anybody who is an historian for that period, or indeed was around, obviously sadly not now, who said, oh no, it was terrible, it was really boring. They all say, oh yeah, watching Ascari was just incredible. And Mario Andretti, you talk about that, you speak to Mario Andretti about watching Alberto Ascari and how good it was and what that meant to him to see the way that man drove. So it's all about how you perceive your Formula One, whether it has to be close, lots of overtaking, whether you're watching a masterclass, an Ayrton Senna, an Alberto Ascari, a Jim Clark, or whether you want it to be just like, British Touring Car Championship with lots of, weight adjusted cars being incredibly competitive and an unpredictable result, different winner for every 6 races, So it's what you perceive Formula One to be. For me, it's the ultimate test of driving the perfect lap, or as near the perfect lap as you can get in qualifying, and whoever that is should be on the pole always. And if he then shows his domination and his ability to massage the car and wins by a lap, so be it. I like perfection. A lot of people don't, but a lot of people do. Think about the number of people that used to swarm to golf when Tiger Woods was winning by 10 shots. They still loved it because they were watching perfection. And so it is with racing. It's just that we need to be shown more about what's going on. In the days of Alberto Ascari, you could see the elbows, you could see the hands, you could see the helmet. These days, we need to see more of what these drivers are actually doing. And we can do that through the telemetry, the radio, and for great camera work behind the scenes. So there we go. Rossi Wilton is replying to Dwayne. Thank you very much, Rossi. I appreciate that. I won't put that up because it's getting boring, all that. Not you, but all that Dwayne stuff. Arvorides, did you ever attend a race in Adelaide? Did I ever attend a race in Adelaide? Of course. And in fact, I didn't attend every race in Adelaide. I was certainly there for the first and used to love it. What a great Grand Prix it was. It was the perfect size city for the perfect Grand Prix at the end of the year. Great atmosphere. Everybody then went on holiday afterwards in that part of the world. The whole race had that sort of end of season feel to it, and the Australians do that so well. Wonderful viewing facilities there. Great racetrack, I thought. Always interesting corners, nice hotels. Everything was perfect about it. And that's where I had a lot of fun there with Derek Warwick. It always usually chimed in with the South Australian Open Golf. So there was always the Pro-Am you could set up with a Greg Norman and a Nigel Mansell playing together, David Graham. And then you'd always hang out at the casino for a bit. Not necessarily playing the roulette, but a nice meal. And then the driving to and from the track wasn't too far away. I remember giving Ron Dennis a lift to the track a couple of times, Mika Hakkinen a lift a few times, just out of the blue. And then in the bar in the Hilton, Sting would be sitting there having a drink with his drummer because he was about to do a live concert. Nothing tied into the Grand Prix, but fascinated to hear we're from Formula One and wanting to come to the race as well. So it was just one of those great Grand Prix, the Adelaide Grand Prix. I loved it. And I always remember 85, Nigel got the pole. He just won Brands and Kyalami. And I think Keke was pretty distraught. And I was obviously close to Nigel, but I was working for Williams at the time. And I tried to be really objective with Keke. I don't think it ever worked out that way. I don't think he ever saw me as somebody who was acting in his best interests. And I don't think that was the case. I mean, Sheridan, Thin and I were always trying to do all we could Keke. It sounds condescending, but we love Nigel as well. You know, we were just happy with the whole thing. Anyway, Keke won the race in '85, that first race. And it was about 3 in the morning. And eventually I'd gone to bed about 1, I think. There was massive hammering from the basement where the disco was going, the nightclub. And about 3 in the morning, the phone rings. And it's Keke on the phone saying, Windsor. So who is the good guy now or something? And just click and put the phone down. I thought, oh, great. Thanks, Keke. Good one. There we go. So I think we've got more super chats here. Let's have a look at this one. What's this? Yeah. Ferrari say Lewis has a similar style to Sainz and denied car suiting Charles after media questions. Does Lewis drive like Sainz? Carlos was closer on pace to Leclerc than Lewis. Why is that? Well, it's kind of sad. I mean, this basically is everything we've been saying about Lewis ever since 2022, when that bad Mercedes made him lengthen the corners, trying to get on top of the tyre management, just give himself more margin of everything he was doing. It's the first time he'd driven a car really throughout his career when he didn't have a proper front end that did what he wanted it to do. And he's taking that to Ferrari now. I thought, this is where everybody says, you know, I predicted it wouldn't work out for Lewis, but in reality, I thought that it would work out. I thought he'd go back to driving as he used to drive, because he would be relaxed and enjoying himself and get away from the whole Mercedes, George Russell, Toto thing. But he hasn't. He's still driving the same way. And that way is quite long corners, braking in a straight line, not really turning in till he's sure that he's got the rear loaded up. Then he's not going to lose the rear. And then he just drives on throttle and judgment and all the rest of it. They all do. Very like Carlos Sainz, except that Carlos Sainz has been doing that throughout his career. And Carlos actually found a really nice sweet spot for that about a year and a half before he left Ferrari. And he got into a really good rhythm where he wasn't making as many mistakes and he was able to really drive well doing that. And Lewis isn't at that level now. He's never found that sweet spot. He's just driving to make sure he's not going to lose the car at the moment. And it's very sad to see. So just to repeat the question, Ferrari say Lewis has a similar style to Sainz. They're absolutely correct. And I'm pleased that they are saying that now, because very rarely do teams even talk about driving style. But yes, of course he is. But that was clear from the Barcelona test he did, let alone race 1. But it's not a question of having the car suit the driver. If put another way, if Charles Leclerc got into Lewis's car straight away with no setup changes at all, he would drive it with short corners. Absolutely, for sure. And he'd be just doing the same speed as he would in his own car. 1 or 2 minor changes maybe, but not much. And Lewis would get into Leclerc's car and find it just the same as his. So it's not a question of the car suiting the driver's style or not. The driver needs to get the best from the car. So that's why, you know, Lewis is not in the sweet spot that Carlos Sainz managed to find. Took him a while. Took him about 4 years to find that sweet spot of Toro Rosso and then McLaren shunts when they shouldn't have been happening and mistakes when they shouldn't have been happening. But when he eventually found it, as we saw from that nice little bit of donutting that he did, he's very good now. He's very, very, very precise, and that's a lovely thing to see. So very good question. Thank you very much for that. Darwin Life says, Peter loves Reutemann. Well, yeah. No R, 2 N's. But yeah, of course I do. Is anybody not? I mean, what a cool guy. Good in a rally car, good in a Formula One car, good in a touring car, and a brilliant politician at the back end of his life. Senator, multilingual senator. I mean, anybody wouldn't love Carlos Reutemann? Come on. JS says, your insights, passion, deep knowledge of Formula One make every session a must-watch. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Always a pleasure listening to you. That's very kind. Thank you. Very, very kind. Another super chat here, I think. Jeffrey B. Thank you, Jeffrey. If we've seen the best of Lewis and he continues to get beaten by Charles and retires in a couple of years, will people say he was in a bad car or he's just too old for Formula One peak performance? I think they'll say what they said about Michael going to Mercedes, weren't they? That he was just past his peak. You know, Kimi, post 2007. past his peak. A lot of drivers past their peak. Very difficult if you've won 7 world championships and you still feel, you think you still feel motivated and you still, you know, keen to put on the overalls on a Friday morning. But then I say that with some reservation now, because I question whether Lewis actually is enjoying putting on those overalls. I'm sure he feels grateful, and he's a lovely guy. He probably feels quite humble still that he's in Formula One doing it. But that's not the point. He needs actually to be really enjoying what he's doing. And I'm not sure he does, because of the results. And he's letting the results affect his mental approach. And he's become more restricted with his driving. And he's concerned about not making mistakes as he is as much about getting a limit from the car. And I don't think Lewis has ever been like that. He's never had to be in that part. Because when he was driving in a quick car at a McLaren or a Mercedes, when they were quick, the style he was using allowed him to have enough movement and adjustability to play with the variables. And he's not able to do that now. A variable hits him now, and it's kind of a shock. And the survival instinct kicks in, and that's always a problem. So I think they'll just remember it, if that does happen, as a bit like, you know, the postscript to Michael's career. AB, greeting from India. Peter, don't you think whatever we are seeing from Max is nowhere near close to 2021, what Lewis faced, but people were all okay back then as they want a new world championship. Now the people are crying. Quite sure I understand that. It's probably my slightly dyslexic brain. I think what all I can say is what are we seeing from Max now? What we're seeing from Max now is unbelievably high quality work in not the best car. In a car that, and the minute you're in a car that isn't the best car in terms of overall downforce, compromises then come into its setup. And although you could say, well, Max will give himself a good balance for the grip level that he has, he won't. What he will do is give himself the balance that maximizes or minimizes the disadvantage of not having the downforce that McLaren had got. And to watch him drive that car and drive that season, this season, in that car, when everything's right on the edge of the balance, and it's a balance obviously that Yuki Tsunoda can't live with, is truly amazing. It's brilliant to watch. Echoing kind of what Peter Wright is saying, I think he's just giving himself just enough front end to be able to get in and do what he wants with the corner, to shorten the corner and get it in just enough, but right on the edge, without compromising, you know, giving himself too much wing at the rear, and making sure he's got decent top speed and everything else. And he's on tiptoes the whole time. Whereas the McLaren guys aren't on tiptoes. They've basically got the car, they've got the balance to match the grip level, and everything is nice. And Oscar can drive his way, and Lando can drive his way, and that's what you're seeing. But with Max, it's on tiptoes, and it's such a thin edge that a guy like Tsunoda's got no chance. And he might around somewhere like Canada, maybe. I don't think the grip disadvantage will be as big there. But in general, you know, Max is doing an unbelievably good job. So that's what we're seeing. And what you're saying is nowhere close to 21 when Lewis faced. Well, Lewis is in a pretty good car in 21. Very good Mercedes in 21. Very similar cars. I think in overall grip level, Mercedes and Red Bull were just about equal, were they not? Anyway, I haven't really answered your question because I don't really understand the phraseology. I'm sorry about that. Bono is doing a great job. Do we get 100 likes? There are 351 viewers. I don't know how many actual live viewers there are, but anyway. So there we go. Darwin Life says Scotch fillet and Bernays. Yeah, well, that's that lovely hotel near Zolder that Bernard Caillet always used to book me into. You must stay in this hotel. And it was always the most incredible steak au poivre with cream sauce, mushroom sauce. That's right. Never had one since. It was so good. I just said, well, no point me eating steak anymore. Nothing will ever be better than that. It's a bit like a golfer getting a hole in one. That's the whole object of the game, isn't it? Okay, go and do something else now. Okay, done that one. Okay, it's Max Flashlight says sardines are named after the island of Sardinia. Well, there you go. It's not the other way around. Who's more talented? Asked Lucas. Lewis or Max? Well, it depends what you mean by talented. I know it's a bit of a cop-out of a reply, but talent implies natural gift, doesn't it? I'd say very similar. I think God gave them the same amount of talent in equal proportions in virtually every area. It's very difficult. I think how they've used that talent has changed over the years. Lewis has maximized it for many years. Max has maximized it virtually from day one. But Lewis isn't maximizing it now, I don't think. I think he should be enjoying his driving a bit more. AB, Peter, maybe Lando and Leclerc are more talented than Oscar, but the mental strength that Oscar has and his calm demeanor and no nonsense of social media just tips him to becoming multi-world champion. I think you're right, Well, whether he would beat Leclerc in a McLaren as comprehensively as he's currently beating Lando Norris, I don't know. I think Leclerc's short corners would give him the advantage. Having said that, I've always said that I think Oscar has the talent, the latent talent about which we were speaking in the previous question, to develop that side of his skill. I think he can shorten his corners, and I think he's got quite a lot of time to find over a season if he can successfully do that. He shouldn't right now because he's got this beautiful sweet spot of how he's driving, and it's working as well as it needs to work in order to win the championship. But I think if he ever had a Leclerc or a Max alongside him, he would need to start thinking about shorter corners. And I don't think there's any reason to believe that he would get beaten by a Max or Leclerc, providing he did work on those areas. But at the moment, he's definitely driving on the rear, as Mark Hughes is saying, apparently. So I think that's right. But it's not only, of course, a lot of it is about your mentality and it's about your mental strength. But that's not the only thing. It is also about technique as well. And if you did have a Leclerc there, it would show up a little bit Oscar's technique, I think. But mentally, he's probably more stable and stronger than Leclerc. So that's a plus on the other side. So there we go. So Sarosh Suman. Hi, Peter. I thought Leclerc's overtake of Russell in turn 5 was fantastic. Yep. It was very good. Turn 5. It was a T-bone, I think, wasn't it? Is that what we call it? Did he actually overtake him? I suppose he did, didn't he? Yeah. Yeah. That was a lot of people say, oh, it's terrible advantage, terrible example. But I would say, if you're a father of a young kid on the way up and you're wondering if that's going to be a bad example for your son, I would say, or daughter, I would say, do your own thing. Ultimately, fathers play a big role in the mental approach of young drivers and how you handle pressure situations like that when things aren't going right. Do you throw your helmet? Do you not? And a lot of what you see with Max is what we saw of Joss. And I'm not criticizing it now. I'm just saying Joss was a hard, tough street fighter that came up the hard way and nobody ever told him what to do, basically. And I guess Max grew up in that environment and he's basically very calm and very controlled. But you see a bit of that coming out when things get on top of him. And that's what we saw with that. I'm not saying it's an excuse. I'm just saying that, for all the great things Max does in a racing car and all the great things Joss has done for Max and with Max throughout his career, there will be moments when the other side will come through. And every father should know that it's their influence on their own son or daughter that is important, not what Max is doing as a result of his background. Mike Williams, do you think Lando should employ Nico Rosberg to help him find those marginal gains to beat his teammate? No, definitely not. I think that would be a mistake, and I think it would be too much talking and not enough gut feel of driving the racing car. That's my opinion. Sarosh Soman, Peter, how was Max able to control the car with a snap oversteer and still be able to get up to speed so fast that Leclerc was not that much ahead? Brilliant. Yeah. Well, it's all to do with anticipation. He manipulates the car in such a way that even if going through 9 or wherever, it's prone to snap oversteer, he's kind of ready for it in the way he's got the car settled at any given moment. That is the beauty of the way he drives. And it's all to do with having the car square to the road, flat to the road, if you like, and a sensitivity of touch and making the tires work at their maximum in terms of grip and balance, as distinct from leaning on them excessively. It's when you're leaning on a tire and you then get crosswind or flick oversteer for a bump that you're in trouble. Max tries to lean on the tires as little as possible. And when he is leaning, he does it in a very 4-tire sort of way. All 4 tires take the lean, if you see what I mean. And it's an incredible skill. I do think Charles has that as well. And I think that's what Lewis is struggling with at the moment to beat. But you don't see that on TV. It's a very difficult thing to see. All we'd ever see is an onboard of Max not having a moment of flick oversteer and another driver having a moment with flick oversteer. But you're not seeing the build up to it and why and how the load is distributed on the car that's preventing Max from feeling that sudden break. Nearly at the 2-hour mark, guys, so I'm going to have to go fairly soon. Trail break 3. So Lewis Hamilton at least scored points in a tractor and won a sprint race. What about Alonso? 0 points. Well, that's right. You know, he did win that thing in China. So that should be enough for him to be happy and relax and enjoy his racing. But anyway. Jules Maxi, after hearing what Oscar's been doing behind the scenes to combat the stresses of a championship battle, I think that he's got this one sewn up, not to mention how he's helping develop the future regs. Yeah, well, he's just a, you know, he's a Steve Waugh, isn't he? What more can I say? He's just true Aussie grit and, you know, don't worry about it, mate. I'll never forget Steve Waugh. I went to his last test match at Sydney, and there's a cricket for those who aren't into it. And Steve Waugh was, you know, one of the great Australian captains, batsman, bowler, all-rounder, really good. Call them batters these days, I think, don't we? Anyway, the next day he was playing in a match in Goulburn, I think it was, which was, I think it's the hometown of Don Bradman, Sir Don Bradman. Anyway, the match was underway, and Steve rolls up in his Holden, his SUV or whatever. No, nothing on the side, just on his own, but maybe with one bloke in the car, and strides over to the changing room. There's a balcony, and walks up to the balcony and to watch. And he's there, and he's a sort of, you know, check shirt, jeans, and everybody's watching the match, some invitational match. I think England was probably playing, I guess. And suddenly somebody spots Steve Waugh on the balcony. There's quite a big crowd. I don't know, it must have been about 4,000 people. And somebody stands up and points and starts clapping. And the whole arena then just stood up and started clapping him. And Steve's there completely embarrassed. He just goes like that, a little wave like that, carry on. And it was just like, wow, this guy, you know. And I think Oscar's a bit like that. Well, very like that. I think he's just, you know, I don't want any of this stuff, mate. Let's drive the race car. Yeah, I've been very lucky. Good bloke. Malcolm Duncan says, Lucien Bianchi would have won the London to Sydney, except for 2 idiots in a Mini drove up a closed stage the wrong way and they crashed into him. I don't actually think it was that, actually. I mean, it definitely had a massive shunt, but Lucien was not driving. He was sleeping because it was a road section, and it was a single lane. It was a 2-lane road. It wasn't a dual carriage. It was a 2-lane road. And as far as I remember it, and I was actually there at Warwick Farm waiting, it was a truck, and the truck driver had fallen asleep. It was early in the morning, and he just drove into them. It was a massive shunt head on. So there we go. Nick THKS, hi Peter, do you think Fangio gets overlooked a bit in terms of modern day opinion, the mainstream one anyway? It seems like people always acknowledge him quickly and move on. I do think he does get shrift from everyone. I don't think he did at the time, but and if ever you spoke to Sterling Moss about Fangio, he would just say, nah, he was better than me. He was the best racing driver I ever saw. Sterling would always say that. And we'd sort of kid a bit, Nigel Roebuck and I, and say, oh, come on, Stel, you know, you won that British Grand Prix 55, fair and square. No. Fangio let me win it. No, Stel, no. And we'd have this sort of banter going on. But no, he was unbelievably good. And bear in mind, his career was punctuated by World War II, and he sat out, 4 or 5 years in Argentina when he should have been over in Europe. Every time he got in a race car, he was either the, first or second. He was just amazing. There's a bit of a cliche about he wasn't that good, wasn't as good as Sterling in long distance sports car racing. Maybe that's the case, but he was quick, and he did so well in Grand Prix racing that did he need to prove anything else? I think, that whole 52 business, he did that race in Ireland, TT, and then drove all the way to Monza and drove absolutely shattered, and then had a big shunt in the Italian Grand Prix practice because he was so tired, having driven all the way to Italy. And I think that probably changed the way Fangio thought about the importance of these long distance races. And I don't think he liked Le Mans very much for obvious reasons. And he was right there in the 55 disaster race. So no surprise he was not really into long distance sports car racing in the way that, say, Sterling or Peter Collins were, or Jean Berra. But what he did in Grand Prix racing, just sensational. In the last year of his racing career, full year, 57, he was better than anybody on the planet. And that 250F Maserati, French Grand Prix, German Grand Prix, and other races. And he did a couple of races in 58. And then he had a great retirement. He wasn't a star in terms of a brand. He worked for Mercedes, and he turned up at lots of different things, and he helped his family, some of whom were racing, and he was just a lovely, lovely guy. I suppose some of it's because he wasn't a front page newspaper star in the way Sterling was, and he didn't speak English. I suppose that was another thing. But that's about all I can say. I think he was absolutely brilliant. I don't know whether he was a short corner driver or not. I don't know that. I think he had phenomenal balance and car control. And if you watch the odd onboard with him, he doesn't appear to be turning in quite as early as Sterling. But very difficult to say. Okay, let's get a couple more questions. Liviu Argensen says, indeed, I was correcting someone. I also feel Lewis will be good in Canada and will have a good race, as that is one of his favourite tracks. Yeah, as I say, I'm not sure Lewis, I'm sure he'd probably say Canada's one of his favourite places because it's a lovely Grand Prix, the Montreal Canadian Grand Prix. The fans are amazing. It's a lovely venue. Whether Lewis ever admits to himself that there's one type of racetrack that he prefers to another, I don't know. I don't know many racing drivers deep down that do that because they feel it's admitting defeat on the ones they don't like, if you see what I mean. So there we go. Trail break 3. In testing, Ferrari have solved their rear traction problem. Good. Were they testing with the current car, though? I don't think so. We'll see. So there we go. One more question. Clan Prima Extraordinaire asking an extraordinarily difficult question as well. Hi, Peter. What actually decides where the finish line is in a circuit? Thank you, Peter. I think today it's to do with the actual length of Grand Prix they need to have for the regulations. That doesn't make any sense, does it? Because why would it be different from the start-finish line? If it is not the start, well, it's the start-finish line, isn't it? What you're asking is, where is the start-finish line? Who determines that? That's a good point. I suppose if the Spanish Grand Prix organizer of Barcelona said to the FIA, next year we want to move the start-finish line 300 meters closer to turn 1, the FIA would would look at the safety implications and the increased top speed. Would they? No, not really. I think they just look at the safety implications, wouldn't they? There's no reason why they couldn't do it. I suppose, no, here's another one. I think it has to be related to the pit lane locations and the pit exits, and the circuits are all built with that as a fixture. So it's related to that. I guess you can move it within a certain area, but not beyond practical usage of the pit lane and the garages and the start. Yeah, makes sense. In the old days, of course, the start at the Swedish Grand Prix at Anderstorp was on one side of the circuit and the finish was on the other. I never really knew why that was. I never asked. We just assumed, oh, isn't this mega? We come to this circuit with this weird thing. Great. We loved it. Because nobody knew what was going on at any given moment. But yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. I don't really know. I've sort of thing that you'd need to sit somebody down and I think most people would say, not sure. Bit like my business of moving the pole man, choosing which side. Oh, no, it's not possible. Well, then you say, well, why not? Well, don't know. All you got to do is put a sensor in each grid position. Big deal. So anyway, there we go. So yeah, I'm going to have to make a run now, guys. Thank you so much for everything. Hope it's been fun. It has been for me, that's for sure. And I think we'll have a very good Canadian Grand Prix. I say that even if it's wet, I think it'll be good. If it's dry, I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a bit closer than we've seen recently. And I think we'll have lots to talk about in the week after the Canadian Grand Prix. Remember, this is the last time the Canadian Grand Prix will be in this position in the calendar. It'll be straight after Miami next time. Not that that means much, but it will be for what it's worth. And Canada, always a soft spot for Canada because of Gilles and my friendship with Gilles. Not only mine, but many of us in Formula One at the time who knew Gilles and loved Gilles. Always think of him at this time. And the circuit's named after him. And Montreal was a circuit that he loved. And that first race in '78, his first Grand Prix win was at his home Grand Prix track. And there he was on the podium in a brown ski jacket. No Ferrari badges anywhere. At least Carlos was in a Ferrari jacket, I remember. It was snowing, I think. But Carlos was on the pole. So there you go. I'm another one. I'm another Reutemann stat. So, and a circuit none of them had seen before, including Gilles. Anyway, Canadian Grand Prix coming up. We'll be doing the normal 3 videos for that. So looking forward to those. Big thanks to Jetcraft, to REC Watches, to TrackNinja, to OEM Exclusive, without whom this live stream and indeed our videos would not be possible. And a big thanks to you, the viewers and the listeners, for taking part today. Take care and see you soon.